Ladies and gentlemen, transmitting direct from Lions Den Studios in Los Angeles, California, Crewest Studios and Dan Ubick Productions bring you The Conduit, bringing together motivated artists to share their experience and to pull back the curtain for a first-hand look at a life in the arts. Today, my guests are musicians Joe Karnes and Jeremy Ruzumna of soul pop masterminds Fitz and The Tantrums. So adjust your antenna, relax, and tune in. The program is about to begin. All right, welcome to the fourth episode of The Conduit, a podcast where I sit down and talk to amazing, courageous people about making a living in the arts. Today, my guests are musicians Joe Karnes and Jeremy Ruzumna, known mostly as key members of chart toppers Fitz and The Tantrums. But their journeys didn't start there. Joe's first taste of success was with post-Jellyfish glam rockers Imperial Drag, whose self-titled LP on Sony subsidiary Work Records garnered them the opening slot on Alanis Morissette's enormous Jagged Little Pill tour. Joe also spent time playing bass in Velvet Underground kingpin John Cale's band. Jeremy, on the other hand, first found success with alternative soul phenomenon Macy Gray, traveling the world a few times over and swooping up gold discs for co-writing many of the tracks on her hugely successful LPs on How Life Is and The Id, including the ubiquitous hit song I Tried. This interview is extra fun for me as I've known Joe and Jeremy since junior high and high school, respectively. And during this episode, we talk about everything from striving to be unique, work ethic, and always treating others with respect, to publishing and admin deals, signing to a major label, and balancing touring with family life. Above all, though, hanging with Joe and Jeremy is always a laugh. So sit back, relax, and have a listen to my conversation with my brothers Jeremy Ruzumna and Joe Karnes from Fitz and The Tantrums. Joe Karnes, Jeremy Ruzumna, welcome to The Conduit. Thanks so much for being here, you guys.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big shout out of love to our bro James King. Wish he could be here, but we'll miss him, and we'll see him soon.
I mean, he's still alive. He just
right.
had tech issues.
Thank God. Yeah, exactly.
When you were like, we miss him, it just sounded a little bit.
That didn't sound. Yeah, it sounded a little ominous. But he's alive and well, playing his behind off somewhere.
Yes.
Well, anyway, so I start most of my podcasts with talking about just people growing up and their, home life and what it was like growing up, just because it shapes so many of us. So talk to me about you guys and your home lives, the first music you heard, what got you involved in wanting to do this for a living.
I'll start with this one. This is Jeremy Ruzumna here. Sorry. The funny thing was why I first started listening to movie soundtracks. I was into James Bond soundtracks and like Jaws and like movie soundtracks and things like that. And so I thought I wanted to be a film composer up until like Purple Rain came out. And then I realized I wanted to be a Dr. Fink from Prince and the Revolution. And that was it. And it's weird because also I got into piano to sort of be able to be alone, But then ironically, my job is to not be alone now.
Right.
Nice.
So soundtracks, and then of course we know your fascination with Prince.
Yes,
Dr. Fink.
I'm a huge Prince fanatic.
Yeah, man. What about you, Joe? You know, your dad obviously played and was a bass player and played in bands and all kinds of great stuff.
That's right. Yeah, and my grandfather was a professional piano player, so I had some musical history out there. But I guess for me, it all, I grew up with I have an older sister who is like almost 9 years older than me. And so she had her own record collection and my parents had their record collection. And, growing up in the 70s, that meant that it was like Fleetwood Mac and also growing up in California, it's like Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles were just pervasive. Right. But then my sister had Kiss Destroyer. And what an album to discover as a 6-7-year-old kid, just to look at the cover.
Totally.
And then it's actually their best produced record because I think it's Bob Ezrin produced that one. So it actually sounds great for the genre. And that's, it all started with, me and my friends, wanting to pretend to be Kiss and having our little like lip sync things, but I would always be the bass player because my dad played bass. So it's like, all right, your dad's going to teach you bass, and that's going to be the band. And it, probably took about 4 or 5 years before I actually had one lesson from him, and he's like, I'm not a bass teacher. And then I got some lessons, and it all just kind of went from there. But that was the early inspiration.
Oh man,
I was the kid who was secretly afraid of Kiss. I didn't really. If I'd heard the music more, I probably would have been like, oh, cool. But all I saw was like the lunchbox, and it just used to be like.
It was some comic book, horror movie kind of rock and roll. That's for sure.
That's right.
Well, so
should have known Joe earlier.
Yeah, Kiss was influential on so many people. Man, Paul Grunman and I used to dress up. His mom used to do makeup for us. So we'd dress up as Kiss all the time growing up. Didn't look quite like them, I don't think, but we had fun.
I'm sure it was close enough.
It was close enough. Yeah. So getting into junior high and stuff, you guys were starting to play in bands and all that. And what were kind of like some of the first bands that you played in, and what did you learn from playing in these beginning bands? What you wanted to do, what you didn't want to do?
Yeah, because I think I played in like 2 or 3 different bands that never played any shows. But they all had names. Right. There was Window Pane, with Alex Curtis, I think. And,
right.
And then there was the punk band Subjugator, where we just played Sweet Leaf by Black Sabbath and one original song.
Nice.
And actually, it wasn't really until we had Itchy Fingers, Dan, you and me, at our high school band where that's where things got a little more serious, because, you were writing some cool things, and then we were also throwing in some, that Chili Peppers version of Fire, and, and things like that.
Right. Definitely, like the best band name ever, right?
Dude, you made a whole beautiful font for everything. I still remember it.
Right. Yeah.
It was rad. It was rad.
We played the senior talent show.
Yeah. Yeah. And did not cause the riot, but that's leave that for someone else.
Make it clear that we've all known each other for since back in the day.
Exactly.
Yeah, we go back all the way from me and Dan to junior high, and me and Jeremy to high school.
Yeah. Same.
So you guys were actually more friends with my younger brother, who was in the grade below me.
Yeah. Yep.
I still think you guys is like his kids, like.
Yes.
Because I guess I was 1 grade ahead of you in high school.
Yeah.
It's funny how that still exists. Like, Gene and Miles and Daryl Goldfarb and stuff, they're like only 2 years older, but I still look up to them.
To this day, they're legends. Yeah. Like the Incline was the band. I know we're all 3 of us influenced by the Incline.
Sure. Sure.
This might be too inside. I'm just going to mention it real quick. It's a little bit off your question, but the Miles Tackett, doom, kick. My daughter, Rafi, who's 6, because I'm always doing that sound because Miles Tackett did that sound. Now Rafi does the same snare drum.
That's her beatbox.
She's like, Dad, check it out. Boom. Kit. But yeah, if I don't think I was in bands in junior high. I think I really started being in bands like starting in high school. But that was more like I remember we did a talent show. We beat Elliot Hochberg out. We were tied with Elliot Hochberg for 3rd place at the school talent show. But yeah, the Inclined was a huge influence in terms of they were like, Miles Tackett was like voted best musician, and I remember I met him one time at a makeup test in health class, and he was banging on the table, and I was like, oh my God, are you Miles Tackett? But yeah, band started for me like more after high school. In fact, obviously one of my early most like bands was with Dan Ubick.
Yeah, right.
Sitting right in front of us, it was called Custom, and it was me, you, and Gene and Steve Smart.
Yes, sir.
And that was one of my main interests. And then in the early years, it was just jamming with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
More than bands per se. Initially,
Custom was so much fun. It was like I had been in this little fusion kind of band, which you guys both know about. But been playing kind of like in a band that was not really my thing. But when I started playing in custom, it was more like, oh man, this is so much fun. Like I get to play with Steve and Jeremy and Gene, and it was like solid rhythm section for the first time. And it's just super fun.
That's where I first learned about how to play an organ. That's when I first got that little, it was like a digital organ, but it was cool. And I remember when we were playing at Fado Do, and that was when I first learned the power of like an organ that you could just one note, it didn't have to be like a crazy thing all the time. Just the volume pedal and just swelling one note. I remember we were doing a meters cover, and it was like broken down, and it was my turn for a solo, and I was just trying to work it out. I'm like, how do you solo on an organ? And I just remember doing this, and people were like, and like, shake that down. And it was like, oh shit, okay.
You took to it pretty quickly, man. Amazing. Yeah. You had such a natural touch on the organ. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. So gigs like that were just like such a big learning experience. I mean, just playing in front of people for the first time is such a trip. And man, I mean, that band didn't, obviously went as far as playing a lot of local gigs and all that. But let's talk a little bit about kind of getting into our first bands, your first bands that were kind of starting to do stuff, getting record deals. And I know, Joe, for you, that was Imperial Drag, as far as I know, and then Jer with Macy Gray. So talk to me about kind of getting into these situations that went a little wider and started picking up some traction.
Because I was just playing around and had bands, and, definitely by the college years was definitely, had a band, kind of thrash funk thing, and then started playing with some other people, and actually just started doing some sessions, the recording sessions for people. And, somehow got recommended for this band that was going to have a record deal that didn't, had never played any shows because two of the members were in a band called Jellyfish. And so that, I got into that band, and it took a while for us to get the deal and get the stuff. But, it was my first experience, as a band member in a big label, and learned a lot. I mean, I learned a lot musically. Those guys were all like 5 years older than me. I learned how to sing harmony, and just learned so much musically because I had a lot of freedom in there. But then also just learned about, what it's like to be on a label and be in a band, and then have your schedule just, you are just at the will of the machine. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like this evil machine. It's just the machine of a band. It's like when things are moving, you just kind of got to roll with it. But it was my first time like playing clubs, touring in a van. And I was like, oh, we could do this forever. And the guys that I was in the band with were like, we'd really rather not do this forever. They'd been in buses and stuff. And I was like, this is great. So it was really fun in that aspect. And just, also we opened up for Alanis Morissette on her Jagged Little Pill tour, and having to go out there and play arenas when I'd only played little clubs took a whole rewiring of my mind, like what do you do? Yeah. I have all this stage now, and like, oh, but maybe I could just stay, it's like, didn't even know, like, what do I do with my hands? It's like,
right, totally.
But you figure it out pretty quick because it's trial by fire.
Yeah, exactly. Crash course in brain surgery.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. So talk about like what it was like, as far as when you first signed the deal. I don't know the inner workings of Imperial Drag, but obviously Eric and Roger seem like the main two songwriters. Is that fair to say? Or did you guys all kind of write together?
No, we all contributed to the arrangements, but they were the songwriters. So everyone had,
and how did
musical influence, but not writing influence.
Right. And how did that go as far as, I'm just trying to kind of help people along that are in these situations. What did it look like for you signing this deal as far as, your input in the band, how the business kind of worked out? No, I don't want to get too personal, but how did it, how did that all sort itself out?
Well, basically, because they were the only two that I realized that got signed to the label, so they were on the hook for all of the money. And then me and the drummer Eric Scotus signed a band agreement with those guys. So we were signed to our band members, and then had the option to I could either become a salaried player and make more money, or I could in the short term, or I could be a vested member and get a very small stipend to barely survive, and in the hopes that when we made money, I would get a share of that. And so I chose that option, and made very little money, just enough to be able to move back into my folks' house while I was on tour.
It's always the gamble. It's always the gamble.
Yeah. So I took that gamble. It didn't necessarily pay off financially, but it's if you believe in what you're doing, you got to take the chance.
Absolutely.
Circumstances willing, and I had supportive parents, luckily, who I had a spare garage that was already converted for my sister for a little bit, so I had a little bit of autonomy there. But that's it. That's what it took to be in that band. Also, I was just not home anyway, so I was like, great, place to put my stuff.
Right, and you got all this experience playing bigger places, playing with amazing songwriters and a great drummer and a great band.
Oh, absolutely!
That band was incredible. I saw you guys a few times, and it was
it's
amazing.
An incredibly formative experience for me. I learned so much, and I had so much freedom to play whatever I wanted to do. And at the time, I was a very busy player, and I liked that. I liked being hyper melodic, and so I could, I had that free reign. So it was a very good situation for me at the time.
Sure. Right. Man, amazing. Well, Jared, talk to us about when you first started getting your position playing with Macy Gray, playing keys with Macy Gray, and how that deal looked, how you were brought in, kind of what the situation was with the record deal and all that. That's interesting to all our listeners, just kind of how that works.
Well, the Macy thing was, let's see, like I first met her in, I think it was 95, 96. Damn, it's a long time ago. And I remember she had this cattle call audition for players. She was about to do an album on, I think it was Elektra, as a matter of fact. It was Atlantic for sure. But it was funny because at the cattle call, Rami Jaffe, who's now in the Foo Fighters, was there.
Yeah.
And he was sort of a friend of mine, and he was super cool. He had his cut down B3 set up, and I auditioned, but it seemed like he already had the gig. Strange, but it was all friendly and cool. Long story short, he made an album with her. It was her first album that actually never came out, but I got hired on to tour that album before anyone knew that it was not going to come out. So I got in initially just as like a side keyboard player. And it was funny because we went to do a showcase for the label in New York, but I found out later that before the plane even landed, she'd already been dropped. But we still did the shows, and it was still fun, and it was really fantastic. And then she got dropped, and I was with her for, I think it was like another couple of years. I still had a day job. I was working in a mailroom at New Line Cinema by day, and then by night, usually very late at night, working with Macy. And then she moved back to Ohio for a while. I think we all had a big fight, and she sort of quit the music business for like a couple of years. And I went on my first tour with this band called the Devlins, my first like tour, where I was able to really quit my day job and everything like that. And when I came, that tour got cut short. Thank God. Everything happens in a crazy sequence. It's like the tour got cut short because they ran out of funding. So I came home, but I'd already sublet my apartment. So I was living on my buddy Chris Joyner's parents' couch. And when that happened, I got a call from Macy saying, "Hey, can you come to the studio?" And at the time it was like, I mean, Dan, you know how it is. It's like, it's 4 a.m. right now.
That's when she called me for the one thing I did with her.
Hey, can you come to the studio? What are you doing right now?
2 in the morning.
I'm sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
And anyway, long story short, I went back to start, and we just started writing stuff. And I always remembered writing with Macy that if she was trying to do this, I don't know how much detail you want to get into on this podcast.
As much as you want, man.
We started writing. I always wanted her to have, I had an idea of what I wanted the music to sound like, which wasn't what the first album sounded like. That was more like rock. Yeah. we started writing together, and there was one night I got called in. It was last second. I had other plans, and she was like, "Hey, could you come out to some guy's garage, studio?" And then it was the middle of the night, and I almost didn't go.
Yeah.
Thank God I went, because that was the night that I Try was written.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Which by the way, first of all, we wrote the song. I mean, I was more the music guy, and I didn't even know what she was going to sing yet. None of us did. And then when it came to, she started singing her vocals like after the music had been recorded. I remember the drummer didn't show up, so she played drums, and she kept telling us we were all offbeat. And
nice.
Yeah. And we're like, "Are you sure about that?" But anyway, but the minute she sang the first two lines of the song, we all looked at each other like, "Holy shit, this is a good song." But that's still for like another year or two. Nobody. I mean, we shopped. She was shopping. She was the artist. I was still just a side guy. But people still. It took a couple years of people hearing that song and the other music and rejecting it and saying, "I don't hear it." Before she finally got her deal with Sony, and then that's when it all started. We all, we went on tour, and the great thing was I wasn't signed on the deal. It was just a Macy Gray artist deal, but I was, writing all the music, or co-writing all the music.
Right.
Sometimes me and her, sometimes a bunch of people and me and her, or whatever. And I got really lucky because that first album came out and did really well. Yeah. And that was sort of the start of everything.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So how does that's you're not on the deal, but you're writing a lot of the songs or co-writing a lot of the songs. And that's a good place to be in.
Well, this was in the 90s when people still were buying records, and radio was still, radio is still a thing now, but it was really still a thing back then. So it was, some people used to say to like, they'd be like, "Oh man, you got that last paycheck." You know what I mean? Because that was, it was pre-Napster, pre everything else. So it was a sweet spot to have publishing on an album like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dang.
Yeah.
Well, what other, I'm trying to think about that. I know Joe, you did a bunch of session stuff after Imperial Drag kind of, stopped playing. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about kind of a bit of the stuff you did before Fitz and the Tantrums happened. I'm just interested in your work as a studio bass player and some of the other stuff you did, and kind of what your life looked like at that point in terms of doing session work and gigs.
Yeah. It was an interesting transition, like being on a major label band and touring around, and then it just naturally ran its course. We made one record, we were trying to make another one, and it, just the internal band issues just kind of made it implode and stop before we put something out. And then it was like, I had to go back and get a job. And that was a harsh reality for a bit. But I also, I at one point, I think after about a year after that, I was probably like 27, and I was like, "Oh, my failing career," and was so bummed out. And actually started teaching preschool because for some random, I just met some lady, and there was something in me that was like, I need to get outside myself. I can't, stay in this weird, woe is me. I'm 27, you're only 27. You got plenty of time to try to figure something out. So I did that. That kind of got me out of my head. And the whole time playing in bands, I always wanted to be in a band, so I was trying to do that. But then at the same time started playing with other bands, and that really helped me grow it. I was just playing with whoever would have me and playing great music and learning so much and meeting so many people. And it was a really great scene in LA around that time, which is like the late 90s, early 2000s. But it took me a while to get back out on the road. One of the early things, I think one of my first things back on the road actually was with you, Dan, when I joined Blood of Abraham.
Right.
You
and Scott Sieber.
because I know we were all in the same circle running around playing gigs and stuff. And you invited me into that project, which was really great because also I'd never done anything hip hop based. And it really taught me a lot about a different style of bass playing than I was doing at the time. I was doing a lot of singer-songwriter stuff and some rock stuff. And so to get into hip hop and, having that, a lot of it is a less is more approach, it's like make really impactful things. And also grabbing stuff, like, Serge Gainsbourg type of samples and things like that. And, which are, tonally and musically just so inspiring, did that. And then was doing all these kind of things. And eventually that all led to me getting to play with John Cale from the Velvet Underground fame.
Right.
And also Solo Works. And that was really, really great. Played with him for 5 years, recorded with him, and was still doing other things. Had my own bands that were, I had a band called Pedestrian that I was really, really loved.
Right.
And was,
I remember that too.
Yeah. Trying to get that off the ground. But, even with all of our connections, we were all like great. Everyone was big session people doing recordings and tours with, big artists. We all, and thought we all had the connections that, connections, only go so far if people can't hear what you're doing, and,
right.
So, no matter if you're we were like kind of that band Pedestrian, we were kind of like darlings of the music circle over at like the hotel cafe scene and things like that. So all the musicians would come and see our band because it was really great. But, it just never translated enough. We just did, we didn't have anybody to represent us to go out there and fight for us. I think that was a big thing. Mm-hmm. And then, and then around that, then I was just, that band dissolved and my time with Cale was coming to an end. And I started getting some other gigs, was playing with a band called Five for Fighting and, making some better money touring and things like that. And I was kind of like, oh, I think I just want to do this, just kind of be I didn't want to be in a band and have to be responsible for other people so much.
Right.
And then got the opportunity to play in Fitz the Tantrums and kind of cover for some gigs at first for our friend Ethan Phillips. And then he left. Yeah. And then I came in and joined that. And I was at that point where I was like, I don't want to be in a band, but there's something about this that is too compelling to turn down. Right. I'll stop there for now.
That's an interesting thing you bring up, just the difference between being a hired, musician, a hired gun, as they say, or being in a band. And sometimes our psyches can take being in a band, depending on the personalities involved. And sometimes it's the last thing we want to do, It's just, every situation is so different, Yeah.
No, it's like being married to everybody, all these different people, and and it's, anyone who's married knows that, and has been married for any period of time knows that it is wonderful, but it takes work. And, then multiply that times, however many people are in the band.
Six people. Yeah.
It's something to, it's definitely got its challenges and its rewards.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to that later on when we start getting into that, but, because that's an interesting thing as well. Just the personalities, and then also juggling, families and being on the road as well. But we'll talk about that too. I want to get into Jeremy and kind of where your road took you after Macy and before Fitz the Tantrums kind of started coming together. What other kind of stuff were you doing around those years, Jer?
It was a trip. I guess the major run of Macy kind of ended around 2001, 2002. Yeah. And initially I was in a weird headspace, to be honest with you, because it's funny. Like, I play keyboards. This is an interesting thing just to get into, because everyone does what they do musically, and there's a period, at least for me when I was younger, where I felt like, if you're not good at everything, then you suck and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like, as I'm getting older, you realize you do what you do. You love the music you love. You have the style that you have. But back then I didn't, I was a lot younger. And after the Macy thing ended, it was a weird situation because I didn't have to work for a while. I just bought a house and everything was cool on that front. But all of a sudden I was terrified to work with anybody, because everywhere I went for a while, it was like, that's Jeremy. He's dope keyboard player from Macy Gray. And but people were saying that who hadn't heard me play. So like for a while I felt like I had this reputation as like this amazing keyboard player, but in reality nothing had really changed. I do what I do. Like I can't read music. There's a lot of stuff, I'm not like a jazz ripper. I can't, I just do the thing I do. So like I went through this period where I was just really in my head and I was really terrified to do anything. I was, I would flake on sessions and stuff like that. Just, it was a weird few years of that. I know it's kind of deep, but it might be worth mentioning just because we're all musicians and everyone's in their head and it's a whole crazy thing. But during that time I still was working with a lot of singer-songwriters. I was still producing music. I still got some cuts on people's albums and stuff like that. And I was basically trying to move into production and wasn't going to tour anymore. And let's see. Although, but there were two of you and I did some stuff, right? Didn't I go out with you a few times on stuff? And there was the Breakestra. I did a run with the Breakestra, like we all did, which is awesome. It's cool. It was great. And
absolutely.
The Fitz thing, what year was that? 2008, I think.
I can look right here.
There were like several years of bouncing around where I was I didn't have a goal in mind. I was just working with people, occasionally going on a little mini tour, but not really doing that much and not sure what I wanted to do. And I remember I was on tour. I was on a mini van tour with this singer-songwriter named Skylar Fisk, who's dope. And she and I were working together and writing songs and stuff. But it was definitely like a little acoustic thing. And I got a phone call from our, Stuart Cole about being in the house band at this club Bardot, which was kind of happening at the time. And for some reason, I remember getting that call and thinking, I don't know why, but I feel like this is a really important call. And sure enough, I ended up doing the house band thing there. It was really fun. We had a great time. Prince sat in with us, which was crazy. But then that's where I met John Wicks, who somewhere in there said, hey, I'm working with this guy, Fitz, and he's putting together a band, and do you want to check it out? And I said, yeah. But the thing was, I wasn't planning on ever going on tour again. I was actually planning on getting into scoring, and Fitz at the time had a commercial music company. So I thought, all right, I'll do a couple gigs with this Fitz guy. The music, I will say that when I heard the music, it was actually really dope. There were like two songs or three songs that existed at the time. And they were actually pretty haunting and cool. And I remember thinking like, who is this dude? It was kind of mysterious and cool. And I was like, I'll do a couple gigs just so I can get in. So maybe I can get in on the commercial music thing. But what I didn't know at the time was he was actually ending that business because he wanted to really start a band and make a true go for it doing that.
Right.
And so anyway, it was funny because it's the old story. We got together it's true. We got like one rehearsal and then we started playing the Hotel Cafe and some other places. But I will say that from the first show, the response from the audience was really different than I had seen in a long time. In fact, the last time I had felt a response like that where it made me think twice was when I first played with Macy. So I remember like my ears pricked up and I was like, all right, this is something different. And, it became like, all right, can you do 2 weeks in a van? I was like, all right, I'll do 2 weeks in a van. Fine. And then it was like, hey, can you guys do a month? Blah, blah, blah. And so next thing I knew, I was, just we were a band. I was in the band. Joe was there fairly early on. We did have another guy at first, a good friend of ours, Ethan, but he took another gig and Joe came in and, he's been the guy forever. And,
two amazing bass players, by the way, both of you guys. I said, I've played with Ethan a bunch and I've played with Joe a bunch, and Fitz the Tantrums has never had a bad bass player in the band. That's for sure.
Yes, that is 100% true. And so then once the Fitz thing started, it started really getting busy, and I pretty much, that was it. We were just on a roller coaster ride and went from van tours to, we finally got a Sprinter van. It was like super exciting because we could like put our heads back. And not like, how it is in a van where I don't know why they don't make headrests in vans. Yeah. And,
right.
And so that was amazing to have a headrest. And then, just went on and became the Fitz and the Tantrums thing.
The things we look forward to. If there was only a headrest in my van, then
if I just had a headrest, it's true.
I can get some rest on these long road trips. Oh man. Yeah. I love what you were talking about earlier, just about how after Macy, you were just kind of feeling like people were coming at you with like Jeremy's, he's this amazing keyboard player, which you are. But, the reality of like, I just kind of do what I do. And I think not enough people talk about that. Like, everybody just has their specialties. And as much as you want to be well-rounded and kind of think you can play all different kinds of styles, we all have our taste and we feel good when we're playing in our zones,
Yeah.
And I think the one thing a lot of people don't talk about is just the sensitivity of musicians. It's just naturally inherent in, 90% of the musicians I know. We don't get into this because we're just like, fuck everybody. We're into it because we're sensitive to emotion and feelings, and everybody sometimes feels like I'm not good enough, and I'm not as good as that guy. And I wish you guys would speak on that just a little bit about how just finding your strengths and just kind of trusting yourself and that people are going to love you for the things that you do, and not expecting to be good at every single style,
I mean, I think I realize in retrospect how important that is, because I think when you're a younger musician, it's important to shed, get your chops up, do as much as you can. You never want to stop learning or anything like that. But
right.
Yeah, I think looking back on it now, in my opinion, it's more important to have your style than it is to be able to play every style. And I think that's what's going to, it's what makes a singer. It's the difference between being generic and being somebody that people remember,
Yeah.
And not everybody is going to love everything, like with the Macy thing, half the people would be like, oh man, she sounds like a hoarse frog. And the other people, and then everyone else is like, it's an iconic voice. But love it or hate it, that voice when you hear it. Whereas a lot of the stuff you hear, especially these days with all the processing that's happening with vocals and stuff like that, I can't tell half the people's voices apart. Everyone's sounding the same. And it's
right.
I understand that that's where things temporarily, hopefully, seem to be going. But having something that stands out, I think, is really important.
That's so true. And, from Macy to Neil Young to Bob Dylan there's a million examples, all singers who aren't technically like Ella Fitzgerald or something, but they stand out. It's got a vibe to it, and the music supports that vibe. And that's so important, just have something that stands out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've got this side band right now called Left Field Messiah.
Yeah.
It's me and my buddy Eric from this band Wilding, this guy Steve Bass from that band Hot Hot Heat from a little while back. And it's funny because I met them. This is only a couple years ago that we started, and I was actually at a point where I was starting to feel like I wondered if maybe I had said everything I was going to say musically, and I wasn't really sure if maybe I was just kind of go off into the night, you know what I mean? And but then it was funny because that was one of the first things in a while where I really we got together in a studio, and I just was really given free reign. Like the vibe was completely open, and it was just like, do what you do. And everything I did naturally, things that I normally throw out, because I'm like, I second guess it. It's like, that's not this, or it's not commercial enough, or it doesn't sound this enough. But a bunch of ideas like that, they were like, no, that's the thing. Keep going with that. And it kind of gave me new fuel to keep going. And that project actually brought out something in me. I just hadn't done something that was just purely me in a while, especially because when you're in a band, it's 6 people, there's different tastes and all the stuff that come together. But this was a little bit different, where it was a little bit more pure, and it was a reminder. But the thing I'm getting at is that I just decided, okay, we decided we're not going to make music for any reason other than we think it's cool. We're not going to try to it's not for the radio. It's for us. It's like if we went to a party and this song came on, we'd be happy. That's the goal of that band. And it's just really refreshed a lot of stuff and reminded me of exactly what we're talking about, which is just try just your style and doing what you like. And that's the thing. And it's more, I'm really, really happy with the way that stuff is coming out.
Yeah, man. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, feeling comfortable and feeling like you can trust the people you're around not to make you feel bad and feel good about, the thing you do is so important,
You have to feel like you're in a safe space. That's one of the things about walking into a session cold, that everybody gets that feeling, even though everyone's being cool. When you don't know everybody, you don't know how people are going to react. You don't know if they're going to be dicks or if like it's cool. But yeah, I think most musicians, I think probably anyone will tell you, if you feel comfortable and you feel comfortable with the people around you, you play better. I mean, it's just a fact.
Yeah, that's
right,
true.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a hard realization to come to. And, finding the right people to surround yourself with is as much, I think a key to success as having all the chops yourself or whatever, is surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded and who have a shared goal in mind,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get into, you were talking about how you first met John, the drummer from Fitz and the Tantrums, Jer. And, I read on kind of the story of your guys forming on Wikipedia, and I guess Michael went to CalArts with James. Is that how they met first?
Yeah.
That's crazy. And then John brought in you too, Joe. Is that right?
No, that was,
you knew John Wicks. Oh, okay.
No, like
Wikipedia is incorrect.
Yeah. The stories and myths become a thing, but the actual story is Ethan Phillips, the original bass player. He had, we were friends, and he called me to cover for a gig like 6 months into the life of the band, just over at the what was that club?
3 of Clubs.
3 of Clubs, exactly, in Hollywood. So yeah,
where was the 3 of Clubs?
What's that?
Where's the 3 of Clubs? I don't know that spot.
It was like south.
You know where Nadine's
it was just like
music is?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Nadine's
right there.
music. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, a little south
Right.
of the other music venues and stuff. Yeah, just it was a small room, but fun room, and half of it's a bar, half of it's a little space. So yeah, it was like he called me to cover that. We were all just gigging and subbing for each other and stuff. So yeah, that was it. And then
Sure.
About 6 months later, then he actually got injured in a bizarre whale watching accident. Not whaling accident, but yeah, he
Right,
got
I
hurt his
remember
back,
that.
unfortunately.
I remember that.
And then so there was like a month of gigs that I had that he needed covered just locally. It was like 8 or a lot of gigs, like 6 gigs in a month. And they had just
Hiley got hurt too, right? Didn't they got thrown off a boat or something?
I think a whale breached and underneath the boat and threw everybody up.
Dang.
Yeah, it was not a good scene.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, for like 6 weeks or something, maybe more. But yeah. So then I came in. I think Fitz had called me, and so I came in and helped out for that. And and then it was just that's kind of how it came to be. I only knew James and Jeremy before. And everyone else, I met John on the gig at 3 of Clubs, and Noel, or at the rehearsals beforehand. So it kind of went on like that. And then, Ethan just kept being busy because he was in demand and playing with a lot of people that he was really digging. And he had his own band that he had been in for 5 years. I forgot what it was called. What was that?
Yeah. Orgone, he was in forever.
Orgone. It was Orgone. And, they're a heavy touring entity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he kept not being able to do gigs, and even I couldn't cover some of the gigs at a certain point. And then, and then it was just before everything was about to start when we had a whole summer of gigs, leading up to an album release, and Ethan was busy doing some stuff, and so then I came in.
Right.
And that
so
was
the first EP you guys did, Ethan was on, but then you were doing the shows for it. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, that and the first.
Is that right?
Record. Yeah. Well, and also I think there were other people, because some of the things were, some of the songs were demos before the band was even formed. So like, I think some songs even had Sebastian Steinberg originally just on bass recording, and, different iterations. I can't speak to all that stuff because I wasn't really there for that. That's more Jer's territory because he was around more during that time. Yeah, I kind of came in to support the first full record when the band got signed to Dangerbird Records. So that's kind of where I came in to tour that record, and then my involvement increased later on.
I see. Crazy. Okay. So, yeah, wow. So, it was just kind of like you got in a room for the first time, the six of you, and you could just feel it, right? It was just like a good chemistry.
It was good chemistry, and also, yeah, everybody was, pro. Like everyone had done so many gigs. We
Sure.
all were pretty adept at picking stuff up pretty quick and just doing it. So yeah, there was
Absolutely.
not a lot of rehearsal involved at all.
So when you first came in, Joe, how many songs were there that you got that had been written already? Was there a whole set of stuff? Were you guys doing covers or all originals at the beginning?
No, we had to throw in some covers to fill out a full set. We did like Scott Walker cover in the early days, and they had already done like a Elvis Costello thing. But it was a lot. Mainly, there was an album's worth of stuff. Well, I guess the first gig I did was, things were still being written. So back then, there were probably a couple more covers. But by 2010, when I actually started doing more gigs, there was we had to fill out our set with covers for that whole album cycle.
Gotcha.
But there was a lot of stuff to learn. And first couple gigs I had my notes and things like that, but I was definitely really excited to play this style of music because, like I said, I'd been really kind of focusing on like supporting singer-songwriters and doing my rock band and things like that. And I really wanted to play something that had more R&B and soul and groove to it. And so it was something that I always was passionate about, but never found myself in those bands for some reason, I just
right. Well, you're so unique in that you have all that, you have the Paul McCartney and like Phil Lesh and the melodic thing so beautifully, but then you're also a huge James Jamerson and George Porter fan. So it's like Absolutely. It made perfect sense for you to step into that. And it was like you got to play that kind of stuff finally.
Yeah. Well, and also in the nature of the band, the way it was set up, it was basically Jeremy on keyboards, which is basically piano and organ. And that was it in the early days. And James on one saxophone. And John on drums and me on bass and no guitar and two vocalists and Noel on tambourine. And so definitely as a bass player, there's a lot of room to fill out the space, which
it was a trippy setup with not having a guitar.
And then learned how to, pair it. Again, I, sometimes felt like lead bass at times, and then I have learned how to pare it down a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, you hear about groups that have, singing is the main focus, and then the band consists only of those few things, whether it be Cream or, Zeppelin or something where it's like, or The Who even, where it's like, there's so much space, you have to fill it in somehow, but you managed to find a perfect combination of not playing too much, but filling in the space as well.
Well, you talk about style too. Like, that was for the first several years that was the interesting setup about Fitz the Tantrums was no guitar. It was a big talking point in interviews, but it was because it was funny. Like, for you, Joe, as a bass player, and for me as a keyboard player, that was a lot of responsibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was cool. And it forced us to find different ways of, filling up the space. For me, there was a lot of like distortion and reverb on the organ. It was fun, man. It was a whole different thing, and that was really the basis of the sound for the first couple things. For several years.
The guitar does fill stuff out, and without it, that's a whole nother thing to kind of compensate for.
Yeah, well, especially when like James had all these horn arrangements on the records, and some, and so they were more filled out on, and to try to figure out what to do for that to make up for that, and then reinterpret things, and then also to create those live moments that became the signature of the band. Gotta let things breathe a little bit.
Now, how do you guys go about, has your approach to recording changed at all in, finding that out? For like James does these big horn arrangements for some of the earlier stuff, and then trying to recreate it live is a challenge because you've got to obviously you've only got one horn player. And has that changed the way you approach recording? Like, are you trying to record with a live situation in mind? How are you guys going about that?
No, I'd say it's the opposite. I'd say that we're the recordings we're not taking. I mean, the live situation in terms of like maybe picking songs that are going to come off well live in terms of the vibe and energy. But we're not at a point right now where we're trying to like do arrangements that are easily duplicated live. We have other little tricks up our sleeve for that.
Got you.
Yeah, I think that
that's cool.
comes more into play in the writing of the songs, thinking about big moments and, sing-along stuff and crowd interaction, the things that have become hallmarks of the band. But I think in terms of recording for the last 3 records, it really, especially that second record where we really were progressing in the sound, adding more synthesizers, things like that. It was kind of like, let's make the record happen and then figure out how to play it live.
Figure out the live.
Yeah.
We got a lot of shit for that too, because sorry to interrupt. We got for More Than Just a Dream, we got a lot of shit we kind of went more, I don't want to say 80s exactly, but there were synthesizers added, which was, a new thing for Fitz the Tantrums. There was a little bit of guitar, but not much. Drum machines, like the sound really changed on the album, and a lot of people didn't like it, but then it also ended up being one of our biggest records.
Right.
A couple of our biggest songs came off that album, and it's actually More Than Just a Dream. It's probably my favorite Fitz the Tantrums album. I don't know. Go ahead.
No, but it also stems from that thing of I think at that period, like when we were touring, it was leading up to that, we were really digging the limitations that are that the arrangement, like our instrumentation brought to it.
Yeah.
And that was really great for a couple of years. And then I know as we're like riding around in the bus and playing music for each other and all this stuff, and I know a lot of talk about like synths, man, missing having some synths and other colors, because we only had so many colors, and it was really great. But it was also like, I think we've gone as far as
exhausted that
we've wanted to go with it. It's it's not like you can look at a band like Khruangbin these days who have kept their limitations and they still keep progressing musically, but it's what they are, like AC/DC, like this is what we do, and love it or hate it, every AC/DC record hits just right, because they a band that said this is what we do. We're not going to try to be anything else, and this is what we like, and take it or leave it. And I think that's
we've been more fluid with it.
Yeah, well, and fluid, that's an individual journey for every group, obviously. But like you take AC/DC versus like Zeppelin, who constantly brought in different sounds on every record, where it was like, we did that. Why do we want to do that again? And I love that approach as well, because it's like each record was different. Each record was like, oh, they're bringing all kinds of acoustic stuff and then like alternate tunings and like changing it up a little bit. I think keeps it interesting. I think that was a cool approach.
Yeah, and also I just think that we made a conscious choice at some point that it's an interesting thing, man. Because if you're a fan, this is my theory. If you're a fan, like you go to bands for certain things.
Yeah.
Like fans, it's a natural thing. Even as a musician, I might be the same way. Like if I want to hear, I don't know. I like to just name any genre. Like I don't go listen to like James Brown because I'm in the mood for pop. You know what I mean? And we like to have categories. I think there's a human urge to do that, and like I don't want to put on like, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of some examples in real time, but it's people don't like it when their favorite band changes, is what I'm really saying. Sorry, I'm still waking up today, but people don't like it. Yeah, like if it depends on the band, but if there's a band that you always go to like for rock, and then all of a sudden they put out like a super pop song, you might say, I don't know, I like them when they're my rock band. Why are they doing? And we've been lucky as Fitz the Tantrums we have switched it up quite a bit on every album, and have managed to actually grow. Which it was a risk. I mean, it was a big risk starting with More Than Just a Dream, where we added synthesizers, and then we've moved in a more pop direction, and it keeps evolving, and we've kept it fluid, because people don't realize that as musicians you do want to change. Like we're all musicians, we can all play different. We have different genres that we like. Sometimes I like playing I mean, mostly I'm a soul guy and like a funk guy, but like at the same
Yeah,
time, I love synths and pop and all that stuff. And,
totally.
I don't just play one kind of music, and
Right.
most musicians don't, but your fans want you to play this kind of music that they first heard you play. So it's
Right.
a weird conundrum because you don't want to alienate people, but at the same time, we're people, and
Yeah.
we evolve
Yeah.
and we end up in different places at different times.
Well, yeah, and you
And
can
but it's
see,
a risk.
it's like the artist has to make themselves happy above everything, because there's always going to there's always going to be people who like it. There's always going to be
Yeah.
people who don't like it.
But it
And
is a risk. I mean, it's a risk when you switch up your
totally.
sound.
Yeah.
And we have taken that risk, and for better or for worse,
Well, in that case, it was for the better. I mean, look at how many fans you guys gained changing it up on the More Than Just a Dream record. It's like it just went mega,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So,
Wow.
yeah, and that's something that, we were enjoying, especially making that record and putting in these sounds and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
it was tough at times when you first, you put out your video on YouTube and you start seeing all the haters going, and you
Right.
read enough of those things and you just got to turn it off and just go like, the internet is not the answer to whether people like you or
Yeah.
not, because that's just not a real world. It's not
Right.
authentic.
Comment
to
section,
people.
bad neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a bad neighborhood.
It's a bad neighborhood.
And
Yeah.
it all depends on
Yeah.
when you go out and play shows. Are people still coming to see you live?
Yeah.
And if
Are
they
people,
are,
yeah, exactly.
you're
Are
doing
people
something
coming,
right.
and am I happy to be playing this music and happy to be taking the steps that we took?
Yeah,
And that's the most important thing.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So talk to me, you guys, about like being in a band and say on a song that you've helped write or are a publisher on. What are some tips you could give people for making the most out of that contribution for yourself? How can you, what are some things that get offered by the label in terms of publishing deals? And how do you navigate kind of making the most of your contribution on that said
Well,
song?
I would say that if you have any interest in a song that the label or anybody else has an inkling is going to actually hit or go somewhere, you're going to start getting publishers come after you. Sometimes when you first sign a record deal, the label tries to force you to also sign a publishing deal with them. I don't personally like that. I know that it just depends on where you are in your career. I mean, sometimes you got to play ball and do it. I'm not saying never, but if you find publishers coming after you, it's because they know or they believe, and they're pretty good at guesstimating this type of thing, that there's going to be money. And the only reason anyone's going to offer you, I mean, this is basic, everyone probably knows this, but if people are going to offer you in advance, it's because they are planning on making that advance back plus plenty more. So like a standard co-pub deal is 50% of the publishing, which is 25% of your whole pie. You don't know how that works. Half, if you own 100% of a song, half that is considered the writer's share, which generally in old, just the general standard version of that is that the writer's share belongs to you, the writer, in perpetuity, and the publisher share is like your real estate, your sort of monopoly money that you can play with, and you can sell, or you can, I guess you could say, almost lease to a publisher in a publishing deal. The standard co-publishing deal, they'll say 50% of your publishing, which is 25% of your whole pie. And usually they'll tempt you with a really big advance. But what you don't realize is that it's kind of like a bank offering you a loan, or like it's like a credit card company giving you a credit card, but with 25% interest. It's crazy. And the thing is, it depends on what you want to do too. If you are an artist and you just want to be an artist, you're not trying to write with a bunch of people, it could be the way to maximize your income in a way is if you just sign an admin deal, which is you need somebody to collect your money. Like, you don't know how to collect money in like Japan. You need someone who knows how to do that. You sign with an administrator. Its standard is usually 10%. Not really any advances. It's just a basic meat and potatoes. Like, we'll collect your money. We'll take 10%. And if you've already got a hit song, for example, and that's especially when you're getting a publisher's offering you these huge advances, But again, you're going to take the advance, but then you're not going to see any more money come in until you've recouped that advance. And then when that happens and your money does come in, it's going to be minus 25%. So
Right.
publishers, they know what they're doing. And a lot of times as a musician, like for example, when the Macy thing first happened, before it hit, I was living on my friend's couch.
Yeah.
And some publishers started coming after me. And I almost took a terrible publishing deal because there was a $10,000 advance, which thank God I didn't take that, by the way. But here's the thing. If you're trying to be like truly be a songwriter, producer, really get in the room with a lot of different people, it's true. Publishers they'll come after you and they'll say, we're going to get you tons of writing sessions, tons of cuts. That can happen. It depends on the publisher. It depends on the size of the publisher. It depends on how much of a priority you are to that publisher. A lot of times I think they're just trying to get that real estate from you. Sure. But on the other hand, if it's there are situations where it's a true relationship and they truly can help propel your career. And in that case, it can be worth entertaining the publishing deal.
Yeah.
If you've already got a hit song, though, like it seems to me, you might as well just go for an admin deal and just pocket the money. And by that point, you've probably got relationships on the side anyway that you're going to exploit. And you probably just naturally meet people and start working with them anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I think
unless you're like me and very shy and terrible at networking.
I think one thing everyone should know out there is that when, like say, if you actually, we've been very lucky in Fitz and the Tantrums to have a very strong sync business as far as getting our songs into movie trailers, commercials, things like that, which is a big revenue generating thing these days. That only is going to come on the publishing side. So that is that will not come on your writer's side. So again, you got to weigh the thing. If you're trying to be a songwriter and that's it, or like really wanting to have that be a big focus, having a publisher that actually helps you do that can be advantageous. But if you already have your connections and you're already writing with people and you don't need more connections, then the admin deal might be the way to go because they, just a smaller percentage and it's, different terms.
Right.
More
so
flexible.
That's true. You're right, Joe. Actually, that's a good point. Is like I'm sitting here talking about admin deals, but it's because I have a back catalog that I don't have any reason for anybody to take that extra publishing. Gotcha. But also in Fitz and the Tantrums, we've got a label, and Fitz has his publishers that are. You do need somebody pushing the song, so that's true. We happen to be in a band, so like our portion of it, we can do admin. And we still know that there is somebody out there pitching the song. So that is something to consider. But you got to also consider, are they truly going to pitch your songs?
Right.
Or are they just going to sit back and collect? My first really big mega publishing deal was back in the Macy days. And it was with EMI Music Publishing. And they made a lot of promises. But at the end of the day, they didn't have to pitch anything because Macy's people were already, and also there was a hit, so like they didn't really have to do anything except take the money.
Right.
But although they did, in fairness, they did put me in a lot of writing sessions, and I got a few album cuts and nothing, no major hits from that. But they were getting me writing sessions, and I was working all the time.
Right.
So there's something to be said
with
about
Fitz
that.
and the Tantrums, what would you say is the percentage that the label's bringing in and the publishers are bringing in as far as getting and securing third-party licenses for TV, film, and gaming and all that? Like how does that workflow come through? Like who's doing most of that?
I mean,
or is it a shared kind of thing?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. And I think it might be 50-50. I mean, I think a lot of it is, we've got a name now and people and a recognizable sound for these things. So, we've gotten to a point where people want, one of our 3 songs or whatever. And definitely other songs get picked up as well. But so people are coming to us. Yeah, a lot of requests that just come in, and they can come in through the label side, or they come in through, they'll go straight to everyone's individual publishers or publishing administrators. There's lots of people pitching things at times as well, but I'm not sure what the percentage of that is of things that are actively sought versus things that have just come in as requests that we're just kind of more passive. We just kind of sit there and go, "Oh yes, well, thank you very much."
Right.
Yeah.
I guess my question isn't so much about like percentages, is just that it's kind of a shared duty when you're in a band like you guys have that's already, got some hit songs. Offers for syncs could come through the label, or they could come through the publisher or the admins.
Yeah.
Either way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks for all that insight. That's great. So talk to me about, let's go back in time just a little bit and talk to me about some of your first big kind of opening slots when the first record had come out, and I read you guys were doing opening slots with like Hepcat and Flogging Molly and Maroon 5. And I'm really interested in the opening band situation and how that's changed over the years, going from being an opening band. What did you learn from that process in terms of how you treat opening bands on tours that you're headlining now?
Basically, you just treat them like shit.
Right.
I guess our first big. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. No, I will say this: a lot of times the opening bands go on to be bigger than you.
Right.
I've had that happen, like with Macy when the Black Eyed Peas used to open up for us.
Right.
And it would
her first
appearance.
One of her big things was on one of their songs, right?
Yeah, that's
Macy
right. She did a feature on a song called "Hey DJ." Which was cool.
I was at that video
and also
show.
Will used to be around the studio all the time. We used to work on stuff all the time, but they would they used to open up for us, and then of course they went on to be fucking huge. And we had Walk the Moon for Fitz The Tantrums. They opened up for us, and I mean you could just tell some bands you could just see you're like this. You're not going to be opening for long. You guys are going to be crushing it like on the next tour. Right. What was that question?
I think there's also that thing of, I've been in various situations with Fitz and the Tantrums, but also with other bands in my earlier days where I was opening up for people, and some people are very welcoming, and some people are just in their own world. Not that they're they'll come up and be like, like when one thing that really always struck me was, we got to do a few shows or a couple shows opening for No Doubt in like 2012. And they
was it that long ago?
It was or like 2011, 2012. And so they Tony Canal, who's now become a friend, who's a lovely, lovely human being, actually proved to be that on the very first. He came in and welcomed us in and walked into the dressing room and knocked and was like, hey, I just want to say we're really excited to have you guys here. And, didn't become anything more than that. But, it's that responsibility to make the openers feel welcome and that you're excited to have them there and feel comfortable. Because it's, there are different situations where it's just, like we've been in all sorts of things. And when you have, as an opener as well, it all comes back around, and you really want to be as kind and welcoming as possible, and it comes back to that same thing about being in a studio session. How can you make people feel comfortable to do their best work?
Right.
And how can you help people? How can you help people feel like, oh yeah, we got your back, and there are certain rules. Yeah, you may miss out on some sound check because we're having technical things, and it is our show. If we're the headliners, we don't want to. We want to give you sound check, but there are some times where, unfortunately, that time may be cut in. But we talk to them about that. Go, hey, really sorry about that. We want to make sure you have your time to get comfortable, but some days it's not possible. Sometimes it's not possible.
That's the worst thing about being an opener. Yeah, that's the worst thing about being an opener is you're at the mercy. You're not guaranteed sound check. You very well may be sound checking during your first song as you're actually performing in front of an audience.
Sure.
Which sucks, but it's good because it's just more, it's more trial by fire, which actually really helps in the end, because even once your band has its shit together and you've got techs and you've got people helping you out, so, there's always going to be something that goes wrong on stage, and the more experience you've had just plowing through something, even though you can't hear, or whatever's happening is happening, and you're, playing by braille because you have no sound, but you know that it's coming out in the front of the house. Like,
Right.
It's just better. It's just more experience for life, because there's always going to be something going wrong. You have to always act like nothing's going wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Roll with
and
the
I'll
punches.
also say it is one of the most biggest opportunities for growth as a band to be an opener and to go and play. Like, and even for us at this stage, a few years ago, we opened up for One Republic on a big tour.
Yeah.
And, and they were great to us. But it's still, you're going out there, and in that time we maybe had 40 minutes, like our, 35-minute set. We were like the second of 3 bands, including them. So we're right before them, but you're still like, there's a thing you have to do when you have to win an audience over. And it's, it's a fire that you have to bring that's a little different than when you can walk into a comfortable situation and be like, everyone already loves us and they're already rooting for us.
Sure.
It's I think it's really important for bands to really seize that opportunity, and if you're opening, no matter what stage you're at, to try to gain that extra audience, because that's what we're doing. That's you're trying to expand your audience and get more fans. Sure. And sometimes the bills may not be conducive, and so we're always looking for bills that are like, oh, everyone can be successful and everyone can have a chance to share and grow their audience, and the audience can have a great night all around. But sometimes there's other things that come into play as far as why bills are put together or why an opener is added to a thing. We used to have a little bit more say in the early days. We could handpick people.
It's political.
Yeah, and then there's then it becomes like, oh, you get on a label, and we need to, you guys are a priority, but we also have this person we're bringing up, and we need to have them come on too. So, but usually it's with some thought, because again, everyone wants everyone to be successful.
That's interesting.
So that's a really good point about the audience. It does force you to really learn how to do whatever you can do to bring an audience in, which is great, because then if you have that skill and then you are in front of your own audience, you've just got that even more. You know what I mean? And and you learn about rejection, because like you realize, sometimes you're paired with a band, you're opening and you're paired with a band that it's just a completely different kind of music, and you're like, how do we even get on this bill in the first place? So even though you're happy to be getting in front of people, it's like a completely different genre of music or whatever. And there's some tours, where you're opening for somebody and it just sucks. And like, but it's cool because, you just learn to handle that too, because that's all part of it too. There's, as everyone's always heard, there's tons and tons of rejection, and you got to learn to just, deal with that too.
Yeah. Which is tough for a bunch of sensitive musicians, which we all are.
Absolutely.
There's the stories of Prince opening
you've
for.
Ever heard of started out being rejected by people. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly.
I mean, there's the famous story about Prince opening for the Rolling Stones, and people literally.
That's what I was just going to say. Right. Right.
It's like
you have to. You're sensitive, but you also got to withstand stuff like that, and have enough belief in yourself that you're offering something unique, that you keep going and don't let that get you down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. So I know you guys did at least one show opening for the Specials, and I want to hear about that because I love the Specials. Like,
that would be just before my time, so I'll let you take
was
this
it?
chair.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I missed out on the Hepcat and the Sharon Jones and all that stuff. That was just before my time. So I'll let you take those.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed out on Flogging Molly because it was like the Flogging Molly thing was, I was actually wrapping up a Macy tour. And so there was a sub for the Flogging Molly. The Special, it was great. I don't remember much about the show except that it was awesome.
Yeah.
And hearing them sound check, it was like, all right.
There they are doing their thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into, I want to talk about Picking Up the Pieces. And I read that it was produced and co-written by this guy, Chris Seafried. And I wanted to talk to you guys. Obviously he's got a lot of amazing credits. And I wanted to ask you why you guys chose him and what it was like working with him on that record.
Well, actually, he was in the picture before we were. I believe the way it went down was that Seafried and Fitz were already, I mean, they were already working together by the time it was decided to put a live thing together.
Okay, interesting.
So it's funny because even though like I played on the album and stuff like that, it was always Fitz, and like when I came to do my parts, it was me and Fitz. I don't even ever think I was in the room with Seafried like during that period.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
He was definitely instrumental in like the whole thing and the writing and the production and everything. But I think when it came time to do keys or instrument, little individual overdubs, I think it was just his living room at his, at his house.
Right. Because actually, Chris, I know he played some bass on some of the tracks as well. So he was, I think, very instrumental in, with Fitz in helping him to realize this vision of this new sound that he was going for that re-inspired him to want to do a band. So I think, the majority of the songs on that record were co-written, just the two of them. And then there's a couple ones that by the time the band came in, the band guys, myself notwithstanding, were, in like, was Tighter one that everyone wrote together?
Tighter was, that was a band thing. And, News for You, I did a little bit of writing on that, and I can't remember. I gotta look at the track.
Yeah, I know Noel got in on, I think, Winds of Change or something like that. But it was mainly, for the most part, it was Fitz and Chris doing that.
Oh, okay, interesting. Got it. Well, so the first two singles, I just want to talk to you guys about going on TV shows, because I know the band was on Conan and Jay Leno and all the late night stuff, Kimmel and everything, and eventually Jimmy Fallon. And for those who have never done that, walk me through the experience of going on late night TV, because that's obviously a huge promotional tour for every band coming up. And what does that look like? What's it like the first time? How does it get any easier over time?
It gets easier,
yeah.
But it's definitely
the only one that's terrifying is Saturday. SNL is terrifying. I was on SNL once a long time ago, and that's like, all right, we're live in front of the whole world right now. Tapings, it's still it's pressure. I think we've had the experience of doing TV when we had been really well rehearsed and had been on tour, and it was just second nature to play the song. And then we've also had the experience of like, it's a brand new song. We've rehearsed it a couple times and we're just going to go for it. And that's a little different, but going on TV, first of all, it's an ace operation every time. I mean, they're every single day they're setting up new bands, and it's just like spam. I mean, you just got to be on it. All you have to do is just know know how to play the song and know what to wear. And then everything else,
and don't mess up.
You'll do a couple
and don't mess up.
Don't fuck it up. I mean, if it's bad enough at a taping, it's a train wreck, then you could redo it. But it's there's still an audience there.
But that's
so you don't want a train wreck.
Yeah, that's something to know, is that even for all of the late night shows, SNL not included. Yeah, if something goes wrong, it's totally fine, and you can redo a thing. And we've had that happen a few times for either we've messed up, or there's just most often it's just some technical thing, and you're partway through the song like stop, we're not getting the keyboard, or we're not getting this microphone or whatever. So
generally speaking, though, it goes off without a hitch. Generally speaking, like it's crazy. Your mix is just magically perfect, and then they're very organized. With TV, you just make sure to be professional, don't throw any weird attitude, and they're ace professionals. I mean, they're just, everyone gets just the level. It's just magic. I mean, it's just crazy how fast they work. And then you do a couple camera rehearsals, you do a sound rehearsal. And then the worst thing is just then you sort of sit around for hours and hours.
Right.
Some of the places have fantastic massage chairs.
Oh.
And, but basically you just sit around, and it's funny because you kind of relax because, you have a few hours, but there's that nervous energy in the air, and, I don't know. It's a thing, but, but that's the thing. Like, I remember when we first did the hand clap, I think it was on Ellen, right? And it was funny because we hadn't really performed it live very much, if not at all. I can't remember, but very limited. And so I remember even Fitz was like, still, you get to a point when you've done something enough times, you sort of you figure out everything from where your like for me as a keyboard player, like where my stance is, like what angle, like just what your muscle memory. You're just working on all your muscle memory. And the same thing with the vocalists. They're figuring out where they're going to go and what their moves are. And I remember we did hand clap kind of early on, and Fitz was like, "Yeah, that's crazy." He was still in the moment trying to figure out his stuff for that song, and it came off fine. But it's much more preferable to do it after you've really just, especially if you've been on the road with it and you've just got it just down and you know what you're going to do. That's the ideal situation.
Yeah, right. I realized I did I changed my whole way of playing hand clap from the very beginning. When I would play it, I changed my whole hand positioning, because when I'm doing TV, I'm trying to look up as much as possible and not look down. And then I got to sing often as well. And so I changed the way I play the song for forever, because I was like, oh, if I just shift everything to a different position, I can keep it all in one hand position, as opposed to this other way I was naturally going to do it because of the way I see chords and scales and stuff. That was going to force me to have a couple moves on the fretboard.
Right.
And so doing TV was a direct result for me having to play the song the way I play it these days.
Oh, crazy. Okay. Yeah. That's smart. And what about like all the cameras and stuff? How are you? Do you everybody takes time to kind of figure out the camera angles and like getting situated for that?
Yeah, there's usually 2 run-throughs. They'll just have you play the song a couple times. And as you're doing that, the director, whoever's in charge, is kind of looking at who's doing what. They might see like, oh, okay, there's a sax moment in the song, so they'll know to do that. And so they're really rehearsing too, actually.
Yeah.
And they're figuring out what their angles are going to be. And the main thing for you as a player is, it's always a little disconcerting to have a camera right in your face. You're sorry, you have to pretend it's not there, and you're trying to play and look cool and all that stuff. But meanwhile, there's like a guy right here, like,
right.
And you're just like, so you have to just kind of get used to that and just, I don't know, it's weird. I mean, there's no way to not be conscious of it, but you just have to act like, you just have to act. It's a lot of acting.
Sure.
Yeah. It's just. You get your run throughs. It usually starts with some, a couple audio run throughs, so they get their audio stuff together, and then they do your camera run throughs, and the whole process takes probably about 45 minutes, hour tops, maybe half hour. And but like Jared said, they're super professional, and usually your point person is very nice, very welcoming. I've never had a bad experience with the person who was like, hey, they introduce themselves like, I'm the guy, and like, for our drummer, John, he's the one that has to start everything. So there's someone off in the side, and they've talked and they have to rehearse. So like, all right, 3, 2,
count in.
Yeah. And when, we have to also work out when to do that, because we have a count in on our thing built in, usually, a bar or 2 bars, and when it's going to hit. So he's got to predict that as well, so but he's very good at that. So that's
because you guys are syncing up some kind of tracks to go along with you as well to fill things out.
Yeah, there's some playback, so it's all on SMPTE and it's all it's all synced up. So there's a click and all that stuff.
Right. Dang. Well, I'd love to talk about, just because it's interesting with when you're on one label, like you guys were signed to Danger Bird at the beginning, an indie label, and then got signed to Elektra, and I'm just wondering how that transition worked for you guys, and what was the deal? Just a 1-album deal, or did you have a multiple album deal that got bought out by Elektra? How did that work? How did the transition happen?
I think it was more like Elektra buying us out, right, Joe? I mean, like, I know that there was a little bit of initial drama. I think, Danger Bird. It's kind of complicated. I don't know how much more to do, but they didn't initially want to let us go.
Well, here's the one thing that's very important is on Danger Bird, Fitz was the only one signed to Danger Bird, and we were signed to Fitz. And we did get a small portion of things, but then when we went to Elektra, it was a daunting process, because they had approached us, and really wanted to. We had this one guy in particular who really wanted to sign the band, and it was it took longer than we wanted, and it was a little harrowing at times, because we actually made the record. We had already made the record, and they were buying a record. And they were also buying we were already a solvent touring entity where we didn't have to take any money from the label for our domestic touring. So when we were able to finally do the deal with Elektra, we didn't have to give away as much of the touring and things like that. But it took a while, and it was touch and go, where we were like, oh my God, are we gonna have a deal at all? We have this record and we're all really proud of it. And luckily it all got worked out in the wash. But I know you had another question there. I don't know if I answered everything fully.
Oh yeah, no, I was just wondering, like, just for someone who's on an indie label that somehow, the record, kind of starts garnering attention. And if you get an offer from a bigger label that's going to kind of take the group, further places, has more reach and all that.
Right.
Just how that transition happens from two people who are involved in that transition.
Sort of side note about that was interesting was that by the time we got to Atlantic, we had already done our More Than Just a Dream album, the one where we switched it up and changed it.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about it, and we did it because we wanted to. It wasn't because anyone told us to. We were still on Danger Bird, or at least still in the transition process as we were making that album. But it was funny because a lot of people thought, oh, you guys went to a bigger record label and they made you do like this more commercial album. But interestingly enough, that's not really what happened. That was a complete artistic choice on our part. That album would have been that, whether it had come out on Danger Bird or Atlantic.
Right. The only input they had on that was was just on the single, the first single, Out of My League, was like, okay, this song is good. What, so Fitz and our producer for that record, Tony Hoffer, had to go back in with the input of the president of the label, going like, who's a very musical guy, and Craig Kalman, and he was our old president of the label at the time, and he definitely had notes and like, hey, we got to spice this up. We need some interstitial things, or we need a more iconic intro, and we need a few more transitional moments that are going to really impact and get, he was able to like take what we were doing and had ideas of just the sonic signifiers that were going to bring it to the next level for the radio format that we were going to, because we were all like AAA, which was more like KCRW and, more indie radio stations. And this next one was already starting to go to the alternative radio market. And that is, it's different sounds for that. And so that was where the input from the label really came in, was just, how do you take what you do and tart it up a little bit? It was transitions into
the chorus.
It
was mostly transitions going into choruses. Yeah.
So and then the intro too, like with the More Than Just a Dream, like how are you going to like get that your thing that you're going to sing over and over again? Let's get that in the beginning as well, so it catches people's ears. We were very lucky in that instance to have a very musical head of the label who was able to do that and didn't change the song at all. It just kind of added a few little things, but there was that. And the other important thing to know is then at that point, we also, all of us, all signed to Atlantic and then Electro.
Atlantic.
I think it was Electro.
Gotcha.
And so
that's true. That was a pivotal point for the band because we signed to the label and also our whole band agreement. I think that's the point when we really hashed out a deeper band agreement, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
it's when it evened out and really became, okay, it's not just Fitz's thing and we're signed to Fitz. It's really, we're an actual entity and we're all members and we're all signed to the label and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So remind me the name of the guy who was the head of the label who was giving you the tips on
Craig
the single.
Kalman. Yeah.
Craig Kalman. So when Craig was giving you these tips on the single, was it all stuff that you guys were doing? It was all just mixing ideas, or you guys had to go in and retrack stuff, or how did it?
No, Fitz went back in with
the mix.
Fitz just went back in with Tony, the producer, and basically it was transitions going to choruses, so that they just made some little synth swells and things like that. It was mostly that. Because before there was a deliberate. Initially, when the song was recorded, there was a deliberate decision to keep things sort of flat, and not to not have a chorus and everything, just to definitely do that, but not to do swells and things like that. And basically, the labels acknowledged, and I think they were right. I think the song actually does sound better with the extra dynamics. But it was just like a day of going in and just doing extra dynamics but mostly just like synth swells and things like that.
Yeah, because
was the album version different than the single version? Were there two different mixes? The single version and the album version were different?
No, they were just early versions of the song. But no, what finally got released is what got released.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Man,
It was just a little extra
talk
stuff.
to me about this, because that was kind of like your guys' first big, Out of My League was the first big hit, yeah?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
definitely. Well, Money
like
Grabber
the-
was the first one, but it was a
Right.
smaller level with on
Sure.
the AAA. So yeah, this was the first one that really took it to the next level, where we're starting to play
Right.
like Coachella and things like that.
Right. So talk to me about, from your vantage point, kind of when you have a hit single like that, how does the label management, the band itself, how does it create this snowball effect to get a single to really get traction?
I mean, it's a lot of moving pieces.
It's a lot of behind the scenes magic.
Right. A lot of behind the scenes magic. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's like as a musician, our job is to show up and play and go do the shows and things like that. You know, I mean, I think a big part of these days in doing things is trying to marry a song with some kind of commercial campaign if you can, because you want to get the song in the zeitgeist. Because there's so much stuff out there these days, and you need every edge you can to be able to get this song heard, and not just heard on radio. It could be heard on radio, but if it's getting played on a car commercial, if you're lucky enough to get something like that, then it becomes that song that people are like, oh, I don't have no idea who the band is, but I know that song. And people start whistling it or doing whatever the thing is, you know, and that's a huge thing. And trying to marry that moment of, can we get a good extra promotional opportunity? Or like for us doing Ellen, like was really huge, getting it at the right moment. I think the first thing we did with Ellen was the Walker, actually. And she used the Walker, which is the second single on More Than Just a Dream, as she was hosting the Oscars that year. And so she used it as she had this huge promo, like a minute-long promo thing, dancers, this whole thing to the Walker of her like walking through the back lot and having all these people coming. It was this really cool thing. And then she had us on. Yeah. And I'll tell you this, the daytime TV matters much more than the nighttime TV as far as actually changing any, getting any actual, like if you do Good Morning America, you do an Ellen, things like that, you're going to see a bump in numbers. You may not see as much from the late night stuff, because remember, you're going on. I think that's right. If you're finding the early thing, you're going on. The show starts 11:25. You're going on at 12:15.
Right.
Or later if you're on one of the later ones. So it's just you have much less viewership. But it's all these things that you want to try to get to line up at the right time, and you could have something like, oh, the commercial thing or this Ellen opportunity happened before things were happening at radio, or just after when things started to dip down in your plays. Yeah. And those are the hard things. And that's where like having, you know, that's where the management and the label and all that stuff come into play to try to make those moments happen in a synchronous way. But some things are just out of your control.
Create more and more contact to keep things going, extend it.
Yeah.
And hey, listen, also don't also that's the major stuff right there. And then also on another level, just being a politician and just shaking hands and like, you know, we go to the radio stations all the time to do, when we have a new single, we'll go to make our rounds and do a little acoustic shows at the stations. And, you know, it's being nice to the radio programmers, shaking hands, being friendly, being cool. You know, just basic stuff like that too, that I never really used to consider, but
that's the understatement of the year, Jeremy, is like how important just being nice and cool to people is. You know, it's like
when the band first started out, our outfit we used to wear suits and ties, and it was funny because I used to joke around because, you know, anywhere we went, like we're a super punctual band. You know, everyone just comes in with a professional attitude, and I used to joke around because like we'd even show up in suits. You know what I mean? But it's true. Like just basic things like people are trying to help you, but you know, you got to be cool and you got to be nice. You got to be friendly. All that, those basic things are super important.
You have to say yes to almost everything and work your butt off. And because you don't know what opportunity is going to be the one that takes it over the finish line.
No, I was going to say, you're right. Say yes to everything. I mean, we used to, you know, be like, hey, this guy's got a podcast in his garage in Long Beach. Can you guys go down there and do like a little mini performance? And so maybe a couple of us or a few, whoever could make it would go down there. And, you know, it was like every little thing. Yeah. You would just say yes, and just anything that came your way.
Yeah,
like
we were
the
lucky
first-
we had
yeah.
management that was. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say one of the first things that really took us over the edge, or that brought us to a more national level, that enabled us to then get radio to go behind Money Grabber and stuff like that, was the Live from Daryl's House. Daryl Hall from Hall and Oates.
Right.
In his early
Yep.
days,
Yeah, that was
was one of
huge.
the pioneers of having like his own internet show where he had his band and he'd invite other artists to come on and you'd kind of blend with his band. So for us, it was Fitz and Noel and James went, and then the rest of the band was Daryl's band, and you play some of their songs and they play some of your songs and they do their own versions of it. And, you know, who knew that? I mean, I think at the time he had like 200,000 subscribers, but that was the first thing that took us to the next level. And, you know, obviously, so, you know, it's like, oh, of course you want to go and hang out with Daryl Hall and his band. You know, he's an icon, and, you know, but
sure,
you know, to realize what a cool experience it actually turned out to be, and then how influential it became and how much it increased. You know, we still get people coming up going like, oh, I discovered you at Live from Daryl's House, you know? It's like,
to this day, after every show, Live from Daryl's House.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. He wrote some songs that are just forever going to be in the zeitgeist. Jeez, Hall & Oates, man. I grew up on those records too. They're just beautiful.
Yeah, he can definitely afford to pay
records.
his cell phone bill.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got a beautiful head of hair too.
Yep.
Man.
All natural.
It's true. It's true. Well, let's take a minute just because he couldn't be here today, but just to talk about in our extended circle of musicians, you know, there's just some amazingly talented people, including you two. And, but then there's dudes like James King who just like are freaks of nature talented. And I just love to talk about what James King brings to Fitz and the Tantrums and what we love about him because he can't be here today.
Well, I mean, first of all, like, yeah, I mean, musicality, obviously, like, you go on and on about his talent with that. It's incredible. But also, one thing that I really appreciate about James is, like, that dude is such a good performer. Like, it's so easy to be, like, I'm a keyboard player. I try to perform, you know, I don't sit, I stand. I try to at least kind of get the groove on. But, like, James is truly, like, on every level, just brings it on stage every night. Like he, besides the playing, which is obviously key, just everything. Like even just little dance moves, and just so comfortable with himself on stage. I mean, he pretty much grew up on stages, from what I understand, and like you know, from like being, I think from his young teenage years, I believe, and like just so comfortable on stage. Like that's a dude who just gets out there and just fully is one with the audience and just he's a naturally an incredible performer.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason he's up there in the front with Fitz and Noel, who are also amazing performers, you know, and he holds his own as, you know, and brings so much joy and energy. I mean, you know, even my first days seeing him over at like the Temple Bar, and he's part of a horn section with his big Barry. He always had a magnetism on a personality level, let alone his musicality. I mean, his ear is insane. You know, he really knows his stuff, and you know, definitely on that tip is able to help so much when it's like, all right, we got to figure out the right harmony for this. We're going to rework a song, and like, you know,
that's your man.
His is so instrumental in that type of stuff as well, and really finding the right way. You know, like one of my first things, like when I was coming in and I didn't start singing, and then I started singing, and I'm singing one thing you know, and I've got my way that I think it should go. And he's like, oh no, well, the chord's going like this, and you need to hang on this note for 2 beats longer. And I was like, oh, right. I wouldn't have done that. I'm just like following along with everyone else's notes, you know? So little things like that go a long way. And the humor, and his little, he makes a lot of people laugh very often. So it's like, dude, so key on the road.
He can play with the only person who can play with Jeff Goldblum and play the Benny Hill theme and play with you guys. I saw him play. I was rehearsing with Joey Altrudo one time, and James was playing with Willie McNeil, who used to play with Joey at this burlesque club right down the street. And Joey and I went to go watch him, and he was I haven't laughed that hard in so long. He was just playing behind the girl dancing, playing saxophone, just improvising, but out on the front of the stage with her, getting into it. And I was just laughing my ass off for an hour straight. It was so great.
Yeah.
James King. We love you, James King.
James King.
Well, you guys, I don't want to keep you forever, but one thing I wanted to talk that's unique to this band that I haven't gotten to ask everybody is you guys, and we kind of touched on it in the beginning, is most of this band has kids. And I wanted to just talk about the dynamic of being out on the road and juggling family life at the same time, and what's that like and how you deal with it, and how that goes, being a touring musician on the road, because that's something so many of us run into.
Yeah, up until I was a dad, I never understood when I had friends that had kids who were like, I just don't want to go out. It's hard to go out. I got the kid. I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I really couldn't relate. Honestly, I was like, you're crazy. This is touring. It's the best thing in the world. Why are you doing this?
Right.
And now I'm a dad. My daughter's going to be 6 in July. And it's really hard leaving. It's really, really hard leaving. It's not as hard leaving your wife because she's a grown up and she's not going to have a brand new vocabulary and look completely different when you get back in a few weeks. But your kid is, you know what I mean? So,
right.
It's, and it's also, especially now we're post pandemic. I mean, we've all been in this bubble, so it's especially hard now. But leaving the fam is tough. And I never thought I'd be that guy, but now I'm fully that guy.
Yeah. And how are you dealing with it? You talk on Zoom every day, or how do you guys?
Thank God we live in a time that we have, FaceTime and all that stuff. Because I remember touring back in the day when you had to have a little calling card and find a phone booth.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
that's when I did the majority of touring was with those calling cards.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's people don't even know how good they have it now. Like, but just that you can go and just the fact that you have a map in your hand. I mean, we're going to Europe and be like, seriously, where the fuck do I go?
Yeah.
But anyway, so yes, and FaceTime helps a lot. And it's hard. There's no way around it. It's hard. And you know how it is, because it's like you get that hour and a half when you're actually on stage and you're doing it, but the rest of the time, you got plenty of time to pine for your fam.
Right.
Yeah, and it's also like
that's
coming
real talk.
Back, coming in and out of their lives. It takes it takes a very special woman to be able to stand by someone who's doing this, because it puts, it's a huge sacrifice on everybody on a certain level, and yes, you're going out and you are, hopefully making money for the family and doing that kind of thing. But, it puts a lot of pressure on whoever's left behind. And like, you are going and seeing a new place every day, and, you're just kind of, you've got a lot, as much as you have all that time in between, there can be distractions of just newness of new places and things like that.
Sure.
Whereas the only thing that's changed for your family at home is that you're not there, and that they have to double down on the parenting and things like that. And but then coming back home, this is something that people, I don't know, talk about so much, is finding the right way to integrate. It's taken my family years to figure out, how do I come back home? How am I, because I'll come in and I'll think I'm trying to help out so much, but they've already got their system down. Took them a few days, and there's going to be, there's still, even to this day, it's going to be a 2 to 3 day transition window where I come back and we get used to each other and get used to, like, what is the new rule, especially with young children. My daughter's 9. Especially with young children, you're like, okay, where are you with, what's the latest thing that's going on with the kid? What's the new rule? I mean, have we eased up on the sweets at a certain point, or are we not going to do that? Are they helping out with the chores? Or are they not? Trying to get in sync as much as possible. But I've just come in as a bull in the china shop trying to overhelp, and it doesn't always work that way. And you got to have a lot of patience. And it's like, it's one of the things I learned about just being married is like, who do you want to work through all the stuff with? Who's your partner to work through stuff? Because everyone gets along in the good times, who do you want to work through the problems and issues of daily life with? And,
easy. You're a therapist.
Yeah, well, and having that, all that kind of stuff,
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the hardest thing about this. And like you said, with the pandemic, and having the bubble, we're learning firsthand in real time right now how to redo this again, and it's, luckily these, initial runs are a little shorter, but, it's a challenge.
Right. I mean, if the pandemic taught us nothing else, if the pandemic taught us nothing else, is that all you need is 2 pairs of sweats and 1 t-shirt and 2 pairs of underwear. And that's it.
Right.
Not even shoes.
Oh, man. Well, as I've told you guys a million times before, I'm just so happy that all this success has come to such nice people. And I love love the whole band, love you too.
Thanks, man. We love you.
I wish James could be here today, but sending him out a bunch of love. And man, thanks so much for being on the podcast, you guys.
No, thanks for having us.
Very, very happy
pleasure.
to be here and very happy to get to talk with you, brother.
Thank you, Joe. Yes. Thank you, Jeremy. Love you guys. And
we love you.
Thanks for being on the Conduit.
Yeah. All right. Hope you enjoyed this episode of The Conduit. The Conduit is brought to you by Crewest Studio and DanUbProductions.com. Many thanks to the folks at Squadcast, Polymash, Captivate, We Edit Podcasts, Universal Audio, Audio Technica, Shure, and Avid. Extra special thanks to my brothers from other mothers, Scott Power, Bill Coulter, and Alex Desert. And last but not least, go check out Soul Picnic, my hand-picked music playlists on NotRealArt.com. Until next time, this is Dan Ubick, signing off.